There are places in the world where a wrong turn, a breakdown, or simply stopping for too long puts you in a situation that the locals could have told you to avoid. Not dangerous in the abstract way that any unfamiliar territory is dangerous. Specifically, documentably dangerous in ways that local knowledge has encoded into a specific warning. Don't stop. Don't linger. Just keep driving. These are the 10 places on Earth where locals warn you, don't even stop for gas. Number 10. The I-5 corridor between Stockton and Fresno, California, United States. The stretch of California's Interstate 5 through the San Joaquin Valley between Stockton and Fresno has a specific reputation among California truck drivers, long-haul commuters, and anyone who drives this corridor regularly. The towns that sit at the freeway exits along this stretch, parts of Stockton, Modesto, Merced, Turlock, and the unincorporated communities adjacent to the freeway, have documented crime rates that place them consistently among California's highest for property crime, vehicle theft, catalytic converter theft, and related offenses. A vehicle at rest in a gas station parking lot at certain exits along this corridor occupies a target profile that is qualitatively different from the same vehicle at a freeway-adjacent gas station in most other parts of California. The trucking community in California communicates this risk through a specific oral tradition. Which exits are elevated risk? Which rest areas have had recent incidents? Which stations have enough lighting and visibility to be safer stopping options? Which sections of the corridor are worst at 2 a.m. versus 7 p.m.? This knowledge is circulated through CB radio culture, through trucking forums, through dispatchers who have driven the route. It is not published anywhere in a convenient form. It exists because the people who drive that stretch regularly have learned it through observation and through the experiences of other drivers. The economic context is not incidental. The Central Valley is home to some of the highest poverty concentrations in California, in a state that already has the highest absolute number of people experiencing homelessness in the United States. Agricultural labor communities, chronically underfunded municipal services in smaller cities, and the economic gravity of the freeway corridor itself, which draws commercial activity and adjacent housing without drawing proportional investment in services, all contribute to conditions that sustain elevated property crime along specific exit zones. Stockton itself went through municipal bankruptcy in 2012, the largest American city to have done so at the time, which is a measure of the fiscal conditions underlying the corridor. None of this is a reason to avoid California's Central Valley as a destination or as a place. It is a reason to know which exits you are stopping at, to stop at stations with visible lighting and foot traffic, to not leave valuables visible in vehicles, and to keep stops brief when you don't know the specific exit you're at. The people who drive the I-5 corridor regularly do all of this automatically. The people visiting for the first time often don't know to. Number 9. Certain routes in the state of Chihuahua, Mexico. The state of Chihuahua in northern Mexico is physically extraordinary. The Copper Canyon system, Barrancas del Cobre, is a network of 6 interconnected canyons in the Sierra Tarahumara that is collectively larger and in some sections deeper than the Grand Canyon. The canyon walls reach over 1,800 meters in vertical drop. The Ferrocarril Chihuahua al Pacifico, the Chepe train, traverses the canyon system on a route of 654 kilometers from Chihuahua City on the high desert plateau to Los Mochis on the Pacific coast, crossing 37 bridges and passing through 86 tunnels, descending from 2,400 meters elevation to sea level in a journey that has been described by multiple travel writers as one of the world's great train experiences. The Raramuri, Tarahumara people, have inhabited the canyon system for centuries and continue to maintain communities throughout the Sierra. Chihuahua State also has a documented and ongoing narco-trafficking conflict that has affected specific corridors at specific levels of severity for over 15 years. The conflict is not evenly distributed across the state. The Ciudad Juarez metropolitan area, the border city across from El Paso, Texas, was the site of some of the worst cartel violence in Mexico's drug war period, with its highest murder rates in 2010 and 2011, before a significant reduction in subsequent years as territorial control consolidated. The secondary road system connecting the Sierra Madre mining towns to the border, the specific corridors through which cannabis and other product has historically moved toward the United States, has remained more persistently dangerous. The U.S. State Department advises Level 3, reconsider travel, for Chihuahua State overall, with specific areas near the border and in the Sierra region elevated to Level 4. The practical distinction for the visitor interested in the Copper Canyon is significant. The Chepe train route from Chihuahua City to Los Mochis, with stops at Creel, Divisadero, and Baui Chivo, is a tourist infrastructure route that operates with an established safety record and does not require road travel through the problematic corridors. The people who take the Chepe generally have positive experiences. The people who rent a car and attempt the secondary roads connecting the Sierra to the border without specific local knowledge and contacts are taking a different kind of trip. The local advice, communicated through tour operators, through the Raramuri communities in the Sierra, and through the network of hostel and hotel owners who serve the canyon tourism, is: the Chepe is fine, Creel and the canyon rim communities are manageable with awareness, the flatland corridors toward the border are the specific area where the State Department advisory is accurate. This is geographic specificity that a country-level advisory cannot convey. Number 8. Certain townships in the Eastern Cape, South Africa. South Africa has one of the highest rates of violent crime of any country not in active civil conflict, with a documented murder rate that places it among the top 5 globally in absolute per capita terms. The national murder rate consistently exceeds 40 homicides per 100,000 population, approximately 10 times the US rate. And the distribution of that violence across the country is highly uneven, concentrated in specific urban townships, informal settlements, and rural areas where poverty is most acute and policing is least present. The Eastern Cape Province is South Africa's third largest province by area, and one of its most economically underdeveloped. It has the highest unemployment rate of any South African province. The broad unemployment rate, including discouraged work seekers, regularly exceeds 50% in the Eastern Cape. It is the ancestral home of the Xhosa Nation and was the site of significant anti-apartheid resistance, including the birthplaces of Nelson Mandela, Mvezo, near Matata, and Walter Sisulu, Kutubeni, near Nkobo. The historical and cultural significance of the province is substantial. The current economic conditions in rural areas, in the townships surrounding East London and Port Elizabeth, now Gqeberha, and in the former homeland areas of the Transkei, are equally substantial in a different direction. The specific travel concern in the Eastern Cape is concentrated in several scenarios. Travel through isolated rural areas where road robbery targeting stopped vehicles occurs, travel through specific township areas at night, and stops at isolated gas stations along routes connecting the N2 highway coastal route with interior destination towns. The N2 between Durban and Cape Town, a major tourist route along the Wild Coast and the Garden Route, passes through sections of the Eastern Cape that require the specific attention that any high-crime rural corridor warrants. The Eastern Cape also contains some of the most beautiful geography in southern Africa. The Wild Coast, the former Transkei coastline between the Kei River and Port Edward, is a dramatic, mostly undeveloped coastline with coastal hiking trails, the Wild Coast Trail and Pondoland Trail, traditional Xhosa communities, rivermouth crossings, and a specific character of untouristed South Africa that the Western Cape's Garden Route does not have. The Karoo interior, with its semi-desert landscape, the Amathol Mountains, and the Drakensberg foothills in the north of the province are all places with genuine appeal. The specific advice is not to avoid the province. It is to know the corridor you are on. Number 7. The Sinai Peninsula, Egypt, certain routes. The Sinai Peninsula is a triangular landmass that physically connects Africa and Asia, bordered by the Suez Canal to the west, the Gulf of Aqaba and the Israeli and Jordanian borders to the east, and the Mediterranean to the north. It is one landmass with two completely distinct travel realities, separated not by a great distance, but by the specific geography of where the conflict has concentrated. The southern Sinai, the Red Sea coast including Sharm el-Sheikh and Dahab, is an active international tourist destination. Sharm el-Sheikh alone receives millions of visitors per year, primarily European beach and diving tourists flying directly to the Sharm el-Sheikh International Airport. The resort infrastructure is substantial. The Egyptian security presence in the resort zone is significant, and the visitor experience on the resort coast operates largely disconnected from the security situation in the northern part of the peninsula. Dahab, further north on the Gulf Coast but still in the southern security zone, is a backpacker and diving destination known for its relaxed atmosphere and excellent Red Sea reef access. Northern Sinai is a war zone. The Egyptian armed forces and security services have been conducting an ongoing counterinsurgency operation against Wilayat Sinai, the Sinai province affiliate of the Islamic State, since the organization declared its allegiance to ISIS in November 2014 and began a sustained campaign of attacks against Egyptian military personnel, police, Christian civilians, and eventually against the general civilian population. The October 2015 bombing of Metrojet Flight 9268, a Russian passenger aircraft departing from Sharm el-Sheikh, which killed all 224 people aboard, was claimed by Wilayat Sinai, demonstrating that the conflict's effects were not confined to the northern Sinai territory. Egypt declared a state of emergency in the northern Sinai Governorate in 2014 and has conducted extensive military operations in the region, involving the demolition of buildings along the Gaza border strip to create a buffer zone, the displacement of tens of thousands of residents, and the restriction of civilian movement and media access. The UN Human Rights Council and human rights organizations have documented concerns about conditions in northern Sinai that the Egyptian government disputes. The State Department rates northern Sinai as Level 4, do not travel. The route of the Ismailia El Arish coastal highway through the northern Sinai, which would be the natural overland connection between Egypt proper and the Israeli border crossing at Rafah, passes through the active conflict zone. The tourist Sinai, where the diving is excellent, operates at a different postal code. Number 6. Certain sections of the Pan American Highway in Ecuador and Colombia. The Pan American Highway through the Andean corridor of Ecuador and Colombia is one of the more dramatically beautiful sections of the entire route. The high-altitude Paramo landscape, the volcanic peaks including Cotopaxi and Chimborazo in Ecuador, and the Cordillera terrain of southern Colombia, the small market towns at altitude. It is also a corridor with documented risks that vary significantly by section and by time period. In Ecuador, the highway through certain rural sections of the highlands has been associated with express kidnapping and robbery of vehicles stopped or disabled, a pattern that operates differently from the spontaneous opportunistic crime of a gas station theft. Express kidnapping involves forcing a vehicle off the road, compelling the occupants to withdraw cash from multiple ATMs, and releasing them hours later. The Ecuadorian National Police and Tourism Authorities have documented this pattern on specific stretches, and the local advice, including from Ecuadorian tourism operators, is consistent. Don't stop for strangers, don't stop at night, don't drive after dark on isolated sections. Colombia's situation has improved dramatically since the 2016 peace agreement between the Colombian government and the FARC guerrilla organization, a transformation that has opened large sections of the country that were previously inaccessible or genuinely dangerous. The caveat is that the improvement is uneven across the country. Specific corridors, particularly in the Pacific lowlands, parts of Nariño, and areas near the Venezuelan border, remain areas where the local advice for travelers differs from the general narrative of Colombia's improved safety picture. Number 5. Certain roadways in the Ecuadorian-Colombian border region. The Ecuador-Colombia border region, specifically the area around Esmeraldas province in Ecuador and Nariño department in Colombia, has been one of the most consistently volatile security environments in South America since the partial collapse of the FARC ceasefire following the peace agreement's incomplete implementation. Dissident FARC factions, the ELN, National Liberation Army, and narco-trafficking organizations operate in this region, and the specific danger is the overlap of these groups with the territory through which road traffic moves. Esmeraldas province, Ecuador's northernmost Pacific coastal province, was the site of multiple kidnappings, killings of journalists, and attacks on Ecuadorian security forces beginning in 2018, when the security deterioration that followed the regional spillover from Colombia's conflict became acute. Ecuador, which had not experienced this level of organized criminal violence in recent decades, was caught underprepared. The Ecuadorian government declared states of emergency in Esmeraldas multiple times between 2018 and 2023. The U.S. State Department elevated Esmeraldas to Level 3, reconsider travel. The local advice from people living in the border region, from both the Ecuadorian and Colombian sides, is to use air transport between cities rather than road transport, to avoid the coastal highway north of Esmeralda City after dark, and to treat any roadblock or stop on secondary roads in the region as a serious security concern regardless of the apparent identity of the people staffing it. Number 4. Catatumbo Region, Norte de Santander, Colombia. The Catatumbo region of Norte de Santander department in northeastern Colombia, the area along the Venezuelan border drained by the Catatumbo River, which flows into Venezuela's Lake Maracaibo, is the name that appears most consistently in Colombian security assessments as a region of active, ongoing multi-party armed conflict. The ELN, National Liberation Army, dissident FARC factions, former FARC members who rejected the 2016 peace agreement and returned to armed activity, and various other criminal armed groups have competed for territorial control of Catatumbo for years, with periodic escalations producing mass civilian displacement and documented atrocities. The economic logic of the conflict is straightforward. Catatumbo contains coca cultivation, oil pipeline infrastructure, a corridor for trafficking toward Venezuela, and a Venezuelan border that remains permeable to armed groups even as it is closed to most legal commerce. Multiple armed groups want control of those resources simultaneously, and the Colombian state's capacity to project authority into the jungle and rural areas of the region has been limited by terrain, by the scale of the conflict, and by the specific challenges of pacifying areas where multiple groups are competing with each other as well as with the state. In January 2025, ELN combatants conducted a series of attacks in the Catatumbo region, including in and around the town of Tiarama, that killed approximately 32 civilians, one of the worst single incidents of guerrilla violence against civilians in Colombia in recent years. The attacks occurred while peace negotiations between the Colombian government of President Gustavo Petro and the ELN were ongoing in Havana, creating a political crisis that suspended the talks. The violence displaced approximately 32,000 people from the region in the weeks following, according to UNOCHA reporting. The Norte de Santander department is rated Level 4, Do Not Travel, for the Catatumbo area by the U.S. State Department, with Level 3 applying to the department generally. The capital, Cúcuta, a border city with a large cross-border economy with Venezuela, operates under a different security profile from the rural Catatumbo region. But the rural Catatumbo is not a historical danger or an advisory written from outdated information. It is a place where civilians are being killed in an active armed conflict as of the date of this script. Number 3, certain routes in Honduras, particularly the Atlantic Coast Corridor. Honduras has appeared consistently near the top of global murder rate rankings for countries not in active armed conflict for most of the past 15 years. At its worst, in 2011 and 2012, The national murder rate exceeded 90 homicides per 100,000 population, roughly 20 times the US rate. The rate declined significantly through the mid-2000s as gang violence concentrated in specific cities was partially suppressed by aggressive policing measures, and the trajectory has been mixed in subsequent years. Honduras remains well above the Central American average, which is itself well above the global average. The specific geography of elevated risk in Honduras is not distributed evenly across the country. San Pedro Sula, the industrial capital in the Sula Valley, not far from the Caribbean coast, has historically recorded some of the highest murder rates of any city in the world in specific years. Tegucigalpa, the capital, has its own concentrated high-violence neighborhoods. These cities have functioning business districts, hotels, restaurants, and infrastructure that travelers use successfully every day. The danger is geographically concentrated in specific zones within the cities, and the local knowledge about which zones is specific and usable. The Atlantic Coast Corridor, the road from San Pedro Sula to La Ceiba and beyond, toward the departments of Colón and Gracias a Dios, passes through territory associated with Atlantic narco-trafficking routes. The Caribbean coast of Honduras has been a transit zone for cocaine, moving from South America toward the United States since the late 1990s, when Honduran territory became more prominent in the trafficking geography after interdiction pressure shifted routes. The Colón Department and the Gracias a Dios Department, which covers La Mosquitia, the largest roadless wilderness in Central America, are areas where law enforcement presence is sparse and organized criminal activity is more openly present than in the cities where policing is more developed. The U.S. State Department rates Honduras overall as Level 3, reconsider travel, and Gracias a Dios Department as Level 4, do not travel. Honduras also contains the Bay Islands, Roatán, Utila, and Guanaja, which are Caribbean island destinations with their own security profiles and their own travel economies that are largely separate from the mainland risk environment. The Copan ruins in western Honduras, near the Guatemalan border, are accessible and well visited. Pico Bonito National Park, near La Ceiba, has a functioning ecotourism infrastructure. The country's natural and cultural assets are real and accessible, with appropriate planning and the specific corridor knowledge that preparation provides. Number 2. Certain areas of the Mexican state of Guerrero, including parts of the Acapulco region. Guerrero is a Mexican Pacific Coast state that contains one of the world's most famous beach resort names, Acapulco, and simultaneously some of the most acute and sustained organized crime violence of any Mexican state. This is not a historical characterization. It is the current situation, and it is one of the more specific examples of two realities existing in the same city, separated by neighborhood boundaries rather than by distance. Acapulco was, from the 1950s through the 1980s, Mexico's preeminent Pacific resort destination. A cliff diving spectacle, a location for Hollywood films, a destination for international celebrities, and Mexican presidents. The cliff divers at La Quebrada are still diving. The hotel zone along the bay is still largely intact as a resort infrastructure. The Acapulco that exists inside the tourist geography, the hotel strip, the bay, the cliff diving area, the cruise ship dock, has a security profile that is managed differently from the residential city that surrounds it. The residential city surrounding the resort zone has had one of the highest murder rates of any city on Earth for years running. In 2017, Acapulco's murder rate exceeded 100 homicides per 100,000 population, a figure that, for context, is approximately 20 to 25 times the U.S. national average. In its worst years, approximately one murder per day occurred in a city of approximately 800,000 people. The violence is concentrated in specific neighborhoods, associated with territorial conflict between cartel-affiliated groups, and largely disconnected from the tourist zone in terms of who the victims are. The Mexican families who live in those neighborhoods, the taxi drivers, the street vendors, these are the people who bear the risk of daily life in the non-resort Acapulco. Hurricane Otis made landfall near Acapulco on October 25, 2023, as a Category 5 hurricane, causing catastrophic damage across the city and the surrounding region. The hurricane damage added a layer of infrastructure destruction on top of the existing security conditions. Recovery has been ongoing, with the resort zone receiving more reconstruction attention than residential areas. The U.S. State Department rates Guerrero State as Level 4, Do Not Travel. Guerrero joins Sinaloa, Tamaulipas, Colima, and specific portions of other states at this level. For travelers to Mexico, which remains one of the most visited countries in the world, the state-by-state advisory map, rather than any country-level generalization, is the relevant starting point. Cancun, Los Cabos, Mexico City, Oaxaca City, and San Miguel de Allende operate in substantially different environments from the Level 4 states, and treating all of Mexico as equivalent in risk is as inaccurate as treating all of Mexico as equivalent in safety. Number 1. Certain sections of highway in the Tamaulipas state, Mexico. Tamaulipas is a Mexican border state directly across from Texas, sharing the Rio Grande border with cities from Laredo to Brownsville, and it holds a specific and unusual distinction. The U.S. State Department rates it Level 4, Do Not Travel, the same category as active war zones, while the border crossings it contains are among the highest traffic land border points in the world. The Nuevo Laredo/Laredo crossing is the busiest land port of entry between the United States and Mexico by value of trade, processing hundreds of billions of dollars in commerce annually. The Reynosa/McAllen crossing is similarly among the busiest on the border. The state is economically integrated with Texas, crossed by tens of thousands of vehicles daily, and simultaneously classified by the State Department as a place its own employees are not permitted to drive. The specific nature of the danger is territorial conflict between the Cartel del Noreste, CDN, the successor organization to the Zetas, which was itself a breakaway faction of the Gulf Cartel formed from former Mexican Special Forces soldiers, and rival cartel organizations, primarily the Gulf Cartel and its own fragmented successor groups. This conflict has been ongoing in various configurations since the mid-2000s, when the Zetas Gulf Cartel alliance fractured, and has produced violence concentrated in the border cities and along the highway corridors connecting Tamaulipas to interior Mexico. The State Department's specific advisory for Tamaulipas states that U.S. government employees are prohibited from traveling in Tamaulipas outside of specified areas immediately adjacent to the border crossings, cannot use highways in the state, and must use air travel to reach destinations within Mexico from Tamaulipas. This is not a general country-level advisory. It is a specific operational restriction on U.S. government personnel that reflects the State Department's own risk assessment. The highway between Reynosa and Monterrey, the natural land route from the Texas border to Mexico's third-largest city, passes through territory that falls under these restrictions. The highway between Nuevo Laredo and Monterrey, similarly. Monterrey itself has a different security profile from the Tamaulipas border zone. It is a major industrial and commercial city. But reaching it by road from the Texas border requires passing through Tamaulipas, which is the specific problem that the advisory addresses. The local advice? Consistent across everyone who crosses the border regularly for legitimate business. Use designated crossings at established hours. Stay within the commercial zone of the crossing city. If you have to be on the Mexican side, do not drive the highways between cities in Tamaulipas under any circumstances you can avoid. And if you need to travel beyond the border zone, fly. The people who follow this advice have been following it for over a decade. The logic behind it has not changed. As a Nuevo Laredo businessman who crosses regularly described the situation, for business in the crossing cities, you learn the rules and you follow them. The rule about driving the highway at night is not a suggestion. I don't know anyone who has driven it at night and come back with a good story. 10 places, some in Mexico, some in South America, some much closer to home than people expect. The consistent thread is that the danger isn't rumor or generalized anxiety, it's documented. It's specific to particular routes and particular times, and the people who know it best are the people who live closest to it. Their advice tends to be worth listening to. Hit that like button and subscribe. More content like this coming.